Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Film adaptations are never easy. It's not just about retelling the plot. It's about conveying the essence, the atmosphere, and the small details that made the book so beloved. But while a novel can stretch for hundreds of pages, a movie is limited by its run time. 2.5 hours is almost the maximum. Anything longer is rare. Because of this, many important moments in the Harry Potter films never made it to the screen. Some of them are so significant that without the explanations from the books, the scenes look strange or even illogical. Let's take a closer look at which episodes raised the most questions. Number 1. Why didn't Harry ask the adults for help? Order of the Phoenix. When Harry saw the vision of Sirius supposedly being held in the Department of Mysteries, he tried to send Snape a coded message. But moviegoers might have missed the hint, and in the films, Sirius was never called Padfoot, the nickname Harry used. After escaping from Umbridge, the group immediately heads to the Ministry without trying to contact any adults. In the book, however, Harry checked Grimmauld Place through the fireplace, but Creature lied, saying Sirius wasn't there. That moment was completely cut from the film, making Harry's actions seem rash and illogical. Number 2. The fate of Barty Crouch Jr. Goblet of Fire. The ending of the Goblet of Fire shocked everyone. Under the guise of Mad-Eye Moody was Barty Crouch Jr., but viewers had a fair question. If the Ministry captured a real Death Eater, why didn't anyone believe Dumbledore and Harry when they said Voldemort had returned? The books explain it. When Minister Cornelius Fudge arrived for the interrogation, the Dementor accompanying him sucked out Barty's soul without orders. Crouch was left brain-dead, a useless witness. Without living proof of Voldemort's return, Fudge chose denial. Number 3. Why didn't Dumbledore defend himself from Draco? Half-Blood Prince. The scene atop the astronomy tower seems strange. The most powerful wizard simply lets Malfoy disarm him, but in the book it's far more dramatic. Dumbledore knew Draco couldn't kill him, and he chose not to defend himself to protect Harry. He secretly immobilized the boy hiding under the invisibility cloak, and Draco's spell hit the exact spot where Harry was standing. That choice cost the headmaster his life, but it saved his student. Number 4. Where did the shard of the mirror come from? Deathly Hallows. Part 1. The shard of glass became crucial to Harry and his friends' survival, but the films never explained where it came from. In truth, it was part of a magical two-way mirror Sirius had given him. The pair could use it to communicate over long distances. Harry never figured out how it worked and smashed it in frustration. Later, he kept one fragment, and it ultimately saved his life. Number 5. How did the Weasley twins open their shop? Half-Blood Prince. When viewers saw the Weasley twins' magnificent joke shop, many wondered, where did they get the money? After all, the Weasleys always lived modestly. The answer lies in the Goblet of Fire. After winning 1,000 galleons in the Triwizard Tournament, Harry didn't want to keep the prize and gave it to Fred and George, asking them to use it to fulfill their dream. That's how Weasley's Wizard Wheezes was born. Number 6. How does Expelliarmus actually work? Prisoner of Azkaban. The disarming charm became Harry's signature spell. But for viewers, it's confusing. Sometimes it only knocks a wand away, and other times it throws people off their feet. It's simple. In the scene where Harry, Ron, and Hermione cast Expelliarmus on Snape at the same time, the effect was tripled. The book explains this clearly, but the movie left it out. Number 7. Why did the trio visit Hagrid at night? Sorcerer's Stone. In the film, Harry, Hermione, and Ron go to Hagrid's hut at night. Without the invisibility cloak, Malfoy catches them and it ends in detention, but in the book the scene is completely different. Ron was in the hospital wing after Norbert the dragon bit him, while Harry and Hermione were secretly delivering the dragon to the tower so Charlie Weasley could take it away. Malfoy read Ron's letter and betrayed the plan. The movie cut the whole episode, distorting the hero's motives. Number 8. How did Ginny know about the diary? Chamber of Secrets. When Tom Riddle's diary disappeared from Harry's room, the film never explained how Ginny knew he had it. The answer is in the book. On Valentine's Day, Ginny accidentally overheard Harry and Malfoy arguing and saw the diary fall out of Harry's hands. Later, under Riddle's influence, she returned and took it back. The movie omitted this entirely, leaving the mystery unsolved. Number 9. Why Voldemort didn't feel the Horcruxes. In the Deathly Hallows, Part 2, the Horcruxes fall one by one: the diary, the ring, the locket, the cup, the diadem, the snake. Yet Voldemort never seems to feel their destruction. He rages, he searches, but he never senses the loss of his own soul. To viewers it seems strange. How could a wizard, so bound to his Horcruxes, not know when they were gone? In the books the answer is chilling. Voldemort had mutilated his soul so deeply that he could no longer feel its pain. As Dumbledore explains, he has split his soul so many times that he has lost his humanity. The link between Master and Horcrux was broken long before Harry ever struck the first blow. When he finally discovers that the Horcruxes are being destroyed, it isn't awareness, it's shock. His face twisted in fury, Rowling writes, as Voldemort realizes that the pieces of himself he trusted to grant him immortality are vanishing. All he feels is unease, a vague dread that something vital is slipping away. He doesn't feel the loss because there is almost nothing left inside him to feel. His soul, once human, is now only fragments of rage and fear scattered across the world. The tragedy is complete. The man who tried to conquer death becomes too hollow to even sense his own dying. Number 10. How Neville got the sword. In the Deathly Hallows, Part 2, Neville, Longbottom pulls the sword of Gryffindor from the sorting hat and strikes down Nagini. The moment feels heroic, but sudden, almost miraculous. Viewers see a timid boy transformed into a warrior, yet the film never explains why the sword chose him. In the book, however, this scene carries a deeper magic. The sword is no ordinary weapon. It appears only to a true Gryffindor who proves bravery in its purest form. Only a true Gryffindor could have pulled that out of the hat, Dumbledore once told Harry. Years later, those words find their perfect echo in Neville. When Voldemort calls him forward during the final battle, Neville stands alone before an army. "I'll join you when hell freezes over," he shouts, defying the Dark Lord to his face. That defiance, that single act of fearless truth, awakens the sword's magic. It manifests in the hat, gleaming and ready, as if summoned by his courage alone. The same sword that answered Harry in the Chamber of Secrets now answers Neville at the gates of death. With one strike, he ends Nagini, the last fragment of Voldemort's soul. The moment is not luck or destiny. It is the final proof that courage, not fame, defines a hero. Number 11, Where Winky Went and Why It Matters. The Goblet of Fire film skips a character who holds one of the most tragic threads in the book, Winky, the house elf of the Crouch family. On screen, the story of Barty Crouch Jr.'s escape from Azkaban seems confusing and abrupt. But in the book, Winky is the missing key. She had served the Crouches with blind devotion, even after Barty Jr. was secretly smuggled out of prison by his father. Hidden under an invisibility cloak, the disgraced son lived under Winky's care, silent, weak, and bound by spells. Her loyalty was so fierce that she risked everything to protect him. At the Quidditch World Cup, things went wrong. Winky was found holding a wand at the scene where the dark mark appeared in the sky. "She has a wand!" someone shouted, and that was enough. Barty Crouch Sr., terrified that the truth would surface, publicly dismissed her to protect his reputation. "You have disgraced me, Winky," he said, coldly. That single act shattered her. For a house elf, being freed was not liberation, but humiliation. Her devotion turned to despair, and Dumbledore, seeing her misery, offered her a place in Hogwarts kitchens. There she drowned her sorrow in butterbeer, whispering her loyalty to a master who no longer wanted her. Through Winky, Rowling exposed the quiet suffering that runs parallel to the great battles of wizards. Her story gives emotional weight to the Crouch family's downfall. A father consumed by ambition, a son by hatred, and a servant by love misplaced. When Barty Jr. later impersonates Mad-Eye Moody, his twisted loyalty mirrors Winky's tragic faith. Without her, the film loses that haunting reflection. The idea that even the smallest creature can carry the heaviest burden of someone else's secrets. Number 12. What the Order of Merlin means for Lockhart. When Gilderoy Lockhart bursts into the Chamber of Secrets, his smile shines brighter than his golden robes. He signs autographs, poses for portraits, and never misses a chance to remind his students of his Order of Merlin third class. To moviegoers, it sounds like just another of his self-awarded titles. But in the wizarding world, the Order of Merlin is no joke. It's the highest honor a witch or wizard can receive, given for acts of great bravery or service. Dumbledore himself was a first-class recipient. In the books, Lockhart's constant bragging carries a darker truth. Every medal on his chest, every award he displays, their stolen glory. "I got rid of the Bandon Banshee, you know," he tells anyone who will listen. But the book reveals what really happened. Lockhart stole the stories from real heroes, then erased their memories with a well-aimed obliviate. The Order of Merlin, he flaunts, was earned not by courage but by lies. It is the proof of how far deceit can climb when dressed in charm and confidence. Rowling uses the title to expose the hollowness of fame. While true heroes like Dumbledore and even Harry act quietly, Lockhart lives for applause. He teaches defense against the dark arts, yet can't defend himself from a simple spell. When his own obliviate backfires in the chamber, his memory shatters like the illusion he built. "Who am I?" he asks in confusion. A fitting question for a man who built his life from other people's stories. The Order of Merlin on his wall becomes a symbol of irony, a badge meant for honor worn by a fraud. Through Lockhart, Rowling reminds readers that recognition means nothing without truth behind it. The film shows us his vanity, but the book shows us his fall, the man who sought glory so desperately that he lost even his own name in the end. Number 13. Why Pettigrew died differently in the book. Peter Pettigrew's death in the Deathly Hallows. Part 1 flashes by so quickly that it's easy to miss. In the film, he simply collapses during a brief struggle in the Malfoy Manor basement, strangled by his own silver hand. And the story moves on. No explanation, no emotion. For a man whose betrayal set the entire saga in motion, it feels strangely hollow. Viewers never understand why the hand turned against him or what it truly meant. In the book, however, J.K. Rowling gives this moment the cruel poetry it deserves. When Harry and Ron are captured and brought to the dungeon, Pettigrew arrives. Older, weaker, his watery eyes still darting with fear. as Harry pleads, "You owe me, Wormtail, and I saved your life." Something flickers inside the man, for the first time in years a spark of conscience. Pettigrew hesitates, his grip loosens. That heartbeat of mercy, that single moment of humanity, becomes his undoing. The silver hand, the gift Voldemort gave him as a reward for his service, senses it instantly. Rowling writes, "The hand twitched, it tightened its grip. Pettigrew's own hand was killing him." The magic that created it was bound to loyalty, blind, merciless loyalty. When Pettigrew faltered, the hand interpreted it as treachery. The fingers clenched and his life was over before Harry could stop it. It is one of the most tragic ironies in the series. The man who betrayed his best friends for fear of death is finally killed by his own cowardice. The film shows only a shadow of that moment, but in the book, it's justice shaped like a curse. Voldemort's final punishment for weakness, Pettigrew dies not at Harry's hand, but by the magic of the master he served too faithfully and feared too much. Number 14. Why the Dursleys hated Harry. From the very first minutes of the Sorcerer's Stone, the Dursleys seem heartless. Vernon growls, Petunia sneers, Dudley laughs at Harry's torn clothes and broken glasses. To the viewer, they are simply cruel people, ordinary villains placed beside a boy of extraordinary destiny. But the films never explain why this hatred burns so deeply, why every glance at Harry fills Petunia with disgust that borders on fear. In the books, J.K. Rowling gives that disgust a human face, or even the face of envy. Petunia Evans once loved her younger sister, Lily, but when the letter from Hogwarts arrived for Lily and none came for her, the line between love and resentment cracked. She got a letter just like that and disappeared off to that school. Petunia hisses in the book. Behind the venom, there's heartbreak. She once wrote to Dumbledore herself, begging to be allowed to attend. His kind refusal. "I am sorry, but only those born with magic may come to Hogwarts," was a wound she never forgave. So when Lily died and Harry was left on her doorstep, it was not just pity that filled Petunia's heart. It was everything she had tried to bury. The same green eyes as her sisters, the same reminder of a world that had chosen Lily and left her behind. "Don't ask questions," she would snap when Harry mentioned strange things happening around him. She wasn't just hiding the truth from him, she was hiding it from herself. That's why the cupboard under the stairs wasn't only punishment, it was denial. Every letter from Hogwarts that Vernon burned was Petunia's revenge on a childhood dream. Every cruel word she spoke to Harry was a desperate attempt to silence the echo of her sister's laughter. The Dursleys' cruelty wasn't born of simple hatred, it was the bitterness of a woman who once longed to belong to the very magic she spent her life pretending to despise. Number 15. How Sirius escaped Azkaban. Sirius Black's escape from Azkaban was one of the most mysterious moments in The Prisoner of Azkaban. In the film, it happens almost magically. We only hear that Sirius was strong enough to resist the Dementors and somehow broke free. For many viewers, it felt impossible. No one had ever escaped Azkaban before. The movie left out the very secret that made this daring escape believable. In J.K. Rowling's book, the truth is far more fascinating. Sirius wasn't just a gifted wizard, he was an animagus capable of transforming into a large black dog. "I was thin enough to slip through the bars," he later tells Harry. In that form, the Dementors could barely sense him. They feed on human emotion, but animals don't feel despair the same way. While other prisoners went mad, Sirius remained. Clear-headed, his secret identity became his weapon. He waited for the perfect moment. The Daily Prophet delivered a photo of the Weasleys in Egypt, and right beside Ron stood the rat, Scabbers. Sirius recognized him instantly as Peter Pettigrew, the true traitor who had framed him for murder. That picture reignited his purpose. "I saw him on the boy's shoulder," he recalls. "I knew where he was." The realization gave him strength no prison could suppress. One stormy night, he turned into a dog, slipped through the narrow bars of his cell, and swam across the freezing North Sea. No spell, no ally, only instinct and determination. In the film, Sirius's escape feels mystical and unexplained. In the book, it's an act of pure intelligence, patience, and will. The story of a man who became a beast to reclaim his humanity. Number 16. Why Voldemort Chose Harry. It is one of the most fascinating mysteries left half-answered in the Harry Potter films. Why did Lord Voldemort choose Harry Potter and not Neville Longbottom? The fifth movie, The Order of the Phoenix, brushes only lightly against this crucial question. We hear a brief mention of a prophecy and see a glimpse of a shattered glass sphere in the Department of Mysteries. Yet the true heart of the prophecy, the reason why the Dark Lord marked Harry as his equal, is never explained to the audience. What in the movie feels like destiny, in the books becomes a deliberate choice, a fateful decision that shaped the entire wizarding world. The prophecy, made years earlier by Professor Sybil Trelawney, is clear in its structure but shrouded in mystery in its meaning. It declared, "The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the seventh month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not." It was this prophecy, overheard only in part by Severus Snape, that set everything into motion. When Voldemort heard that a child born at the end of July could be his downfall, he immediately began searching for that child. In that instant, fate gave him two choices, Harry Potter or Neville Longbottom. Both children fit the description. Both were born at the end of July. Both were sons of parents who had defied Voldemort 3 times during the First Wizarding War. But where the film simplifies this moment into mythic inevitability, J.K. Rowling's text gives it human complexity. Voldemort, driven by arrogance and prejudice, chose Harry Potter because of his bloodline. James Potter was a pureblood, but Lily Potter was Muggle-born. Voldemort, himself a half-blood, saw in Harry a reflection of his own mixed heritage, something he despised but could not ignore. In Voldemort's twisted mind, Harry represented the most dangerous possibility, a boy who, though tainted by Muggle blood, might grow to possess magical power equal to his own. It is this decision that creates the paradox of the prophecy. By choosing Harry, Voldemort fulfilled the very words that he sought to prevent. Dumbledore would later tell Harry, "It was, in fact, your heart that saved you. You are protected by the very thing that Voldemort cannot understand, love." But even more crucially, Dumbledore explained that the prophecy did not fix destiny. It merely offered a possibility. It could have been Neville. It could have been Harry. The Dark Lord's choice made it Harry. Voldemort, believing he was acting out of power and control, actually bound himself to the prophecy through his fear and his obsession with purity. In the book, when Harry visits Dumbledore's office after the battle at the Department of Mysteries, he learns the full prophecy. "Neither can live while the other survives," Dumbledore reads aloud, and for the first time Harry understands that he was not chosen by fate alone. "You see, Harry," Dumbledore tells him, "the prophecy could have applied to 2 boys, but the Dark Lord chose you. It means he singled you out as the one he would try to kill. That makes you different from Neville. That makes you the chosen one." In that moment, the reader feels the weight of destiny transform into the burden of choice. It was not some cosmic alignment that made Harry special. It was Voldemort's act of aggression. The films, however, never allow this moment to breathe. In the Order of the Phoenix, the prophecy scene passes like a whisper through broken glass. There is no mention of Neville, no hint that his life could have followed a different path had Voldemort acted otherwise. Yet in the book, the tension between the two boys is palpable. Neville, shy and clumsy, grows up in the shadow of a destiny that nearly was his. His parents, Frank and Alice Longbottom, were heroes tortured into madness by Bellatrix Lestrange, another act that tied his fate to Voldemort's cruelty. Harry, orphaned and marked by a curse, becomes the symbol of resistance. Both carry scars of the same war, but only one bears the mark that made him the Dark Lord's equal. That mark is not only the lightning bolt scar on Harry's forehead, it is the invisible connection of souls that binds the two enemies. Through his attack, Voldemort transferred part of his own essence into Harry, making him a living Horcrux. This connection allows Harry to sense Voldemort's thoughts and emotions, a gift and a curse that define his later battles. It also means that Voldemort's downfall was written not in prophecy, but in his own act of violence. The Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, the prophecy said, and he did, not realizing that by doing so he gave Harry the very power to defeat him. Neville's life, by contrast, shows what might have been. If Voldemort had chosen him, the story of the wizarding world would have changed completely. Neville would have become the chosen one, and Harry might have lived quietly, another child of the war. Dumbledore hints at this alternate path when he tells Harry, had Voldemort chosen Neville, it would have been he who bore the lightning scar, and perhaps you who watched from the sidelines. But the cruelty of fate lies in the fact that Voldemort, with his obsession with blood purity, chose the boy whose mother was born to Muggles, not the pure-blooded son of the Longbottoms. Number 17. How the Half-Blood Prince was revealed. In the dimly lit corridors of Hogwarts, where secrets whispered through stone walls and portraits leaned closer to listen, one mystery outlived even Voldemort's reign of terror: the question of the Half-Blood Prince. The sixth film in the Harry Potter series ends dramatically with Severus Snape turning to the shocked boy he had both protected and tormented and uttering, "I am the Half-Blood Prince." For many viewers, that line closed one door only to open another. Who was the prince? Why had Snape taken that title? The film, elegant in tone but stripped of detail, left this truth shrouded in silence. Yet the book spoke clearly, and the truth hidden in J.K. Rowling's pages transforms not only how we see Snape, but how we understand the duality of his entire life. When Harry finds the old potions textbook covered in scribbled notes, signed mysteriously by the Half-Blood Prince, it becomes his secret companion. The book turns his worst subject into his best, his fear into pride. It is filled with neat handwriting, tiny corrections to official recipes, and cryptic spells like Sectum Sempra, for enemies. Through this book, Harry unknowingly steps into Snape's past. He inherits the thoughts of a boy who once sat in the same dungeon classroom, longing to be seen and respected. But where the movie leaves the reason behind the pseudonym untouched, the book unveils the shadowy layers of Snape's identity, a man torn between two worlds and two names. Severus Snape's mother was Eileen Prince, a witch from an old magical family. His father, Tobias Snape, was a muggle, a man without magic, but full of bitterness. Their marriage was not one of love, but of resentment. Young Severus grew up in a small, cold house in Spinner's End, where the noise of arguments often replaced the warmth of comfort. In this environment, the boy who would become the feared potions master learned early that names carried power. His father's name represented humiliation, neglect, and everything ordinary. His mother's name, Prince, represented the only heritage he could feel proud of. When he later called himself the Half-Blood Prince, it was not arrogance, but rebellion, a way to define himself on his own terms. Rowling's description in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince reveals the pain beneath that title. When Harry finally confronts Snape and accuses him of betrayal, the professor snaps back with venom. "You dare use my own spells against me, Potter. It was I who invented them. I, the Half-Blood Prince." The words slice through the moment like the very curse Snape had created. The anger behind them is not only about the betrayal of trust, but about identity, about a man whose true self was misunderstood all his life. Snape's declaration is both confession and lament, the last remnant of a childhood name that once meant everything to a lonely boy. The book reveals the deeper significance through Hermione Granger's discovery. Always the one to dig beneath the surface, she spends hours in the library searching for any record of a prince family. It is Hermione who unearths the truth. Eileen Prince, a witch who once played for the Hogwarts Gobstones Club, married a muggle named Tobias Snape. That detail, hidden in dusty records, suddenly illuminates the name's meaning. Snape's title is literal, a half-blood from the Prince line, but also symbolic. It shows how he clung to the part of his identity connected to magic, rejecting the muggle world that had made him feel small. The film omits this quiet revelation, leaving audiences unaware of the fragile roots of Snape's chosen identity. Understanding this choice gives new depth to Snape's bitterness toward Harry. The boy was the living image of James Potter, the man who had humiliated Snape in school, and yet also the son of Lily Evans, the woman Snape had loved and lost. Harry's success using the Prince's book, mastering potions effortlessly, earning Slughorn's praise, must have reopened old wounds. Snape saw in Harry not only his rival's arrogance, but his own young self, clutching a potions book and believing it could win him respect. The irony is cruel and poetic. Harry thrives because of Snape's brilliance, without knowing whose shadow he walks in. The moment of revelation at the end of the film, when Snape calls himself the Prince, becomes more than a twist. It becomes a tragic mirror of two generations bound by secrecy and pain. Snape's choice of name also reveals the class tensions that ripple through the wizarding world. Half-blood was a term of insult among pure-blood supremacists like the Malfoys, yet Snape wore it as a badge of defiance. As a student, he belonged to Slytherin House, where blood purity was prized, but he was never fully accepted. His pseudonym allowed him to rise above that shame, to craft a persona rooted in pride rather than inferiority. The Prince half of his name was not just genealogical, it was aspirational. He sought dignity through identity, forging power from the fragments of his divided lineage. Rowling's portrayal reminds readers that names in her world are never random, they are spells of self-definition. The film's choice to leave this detail unsaid might have been for simplicity, but it also erased the emotional heart of Snape's transformation. Without knowing the reason behind his alias, audiences missed the personal rebellion that defines him. The boy who once called himself the Half-Blood Prince did so to escape the bruises of a loveless home, the ridicule of his peers, and the cold sneer of his muggle father. It was a secret crown for a boy who felt like no one. And later, when he grew into a man haunted by regret, that crown became a ghostly echo of the boy he used to be. Number 18, Why Fleur and Bill's Wedding Felt Rushed. When viewers watched Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 1, many were caught off guard by the sudden wedding of Bill Weasley and Fleur Delacour. The scene appeared out of nowhere, introducing a relationship that had never been built up in the films. Bill, the eldest Weasley sibling, had barely been mentioned, and Fleur, last seen as one of the champions in the Goblet of Fire, seemed to reappear merely as a plot device. To moviegoers who had not read the books, the moment felt abrupt, even misplaced. Yet within J.K. Rowling's written world, the love story between Bill and Fleur had been slowly woven through years of subtle character development, family tensions, and an act of bravery that transformed their bond from a flirtation into something unbreakable. The origins of their romance trace back to the fourth book, The Goblet of Fire. Fleur Delacour, the Beauxbatons champion, first stepped into Hogwarts radiating confidence and charm, drawing admiration and envy alike. Bill at that time worked as a curse-breaker for Gringotts Bank in Egypt, but the book hints at his visits home and at his growing reputation as a daring, handsome wizard. When Fleur later took a job at Gringotts after the Triwizard Tournament, the connection between the two was natural. Rowling described Fleur as being so beautiful that she seemed to shimmer slightly. A woman who intimidated most of the Weasley family, but fascinated Bill, whose adventurous spirit matched her fiery pride. Their meeting was not rushed. It developed in the quiet spaces between battles and bank ledgers, a bond formed through shared courage and a mutual defiance of ordinary expectations. By the time the story reached the Half-Blood Prince, their relationship was already well established. Rowling did not treat it as a fleeting romance, but as a mature partnership that challenged the traditional ideas of compatibility. The Weasley family was not immediately welcoming. Molly Weasley, warm-hearted but fiercely protective, found Fleur a bit too proud, a bit too polished. Ginny nicknamed her Phlegm, mocking her accent and apparent vanity. To readers, these details added texture. The Weasley home, usually a sanctuary of acceptance, became a place of subtle tension. Fleur, however, refused to bend. She stood firm in her affection for Bill, declaring, "I am good-looking enough for both of us, I think." Her pride, often mistaken for arrogance, became a symbol of unwavering loyalty. In contrast to the book's layered portrayal, the films presented none of this gradual unfolding. Bill Weasley was never introduced before the seventh film. Viewers had seen Charlie only in passing, heard of Percy's estrangement, but Bill remained a name without a face. So when the wedding scene appeared, complete with cheerful music and golden tents fluttering in the breeze, audiences were left puzzled. Who was this new red-haired man marrying Fleur Delacour, and why was the moment treated with such emotional weight? The absence of prior context stripped the scene of its deeper resonance, the sense of triumph that in the book accompanied the couple's defiance of fear and prejudice. The turning point in their relationship in the novels came through tragedy and bravery. During the climactic events at the end of The Half-Blood Prince, as Death Eaters attacked Hogwarts, Bill was savagely mauled by Fenrir Greyback, a werewolf notorious for his cruelty. Greyback did not bite him during a full moon, so Bill was not turned, but the attack left scars both physical and emotional. Rowling described him afterward as disfigured, with deep gashes and a taste for very rare steaks. It was a symbolic wound, a reminder of the darkness encroaching on even the most innocent of characters. In that moment, Fleur's response defined her. She did not flinch at his injuries or shrink away in revulsion. Instead, she declared in front of the entire family, "I am beautiful enough for both of us." Her love was unshaken. The proud French witch, often dismissed as shallow, proved herself braver than anyone had imagined. This scene, so rich in emotion and revelation, was omitted from the films. and with its absence went the understanding of why their marriage mattered. In the book, Molly Weasley's opinion of Fleur changed instantly after that moment. She saw in the young woman not vanity, but devotion, not pride, but strength. Their reconciliation symbolized unity in the face of war. What had begun as a clash of personalities turned into a quiet alliance between women from different worlds. For readers, the announcement of Bill and Fleur's upcoming wedding in the Deathly Hallows felt not abrupt, but inevitable, a light amid spreading darkness, a promise that love could endure even when the world was collapsing. The decision to hold the wedding before the final battle was not simply a romantic impulse. It was an act of defiance against fear. The wizarding world had grown perilous, with Death Eaters infiltrating the Ministry and spreading terror. In this climate, to celebrate love was itself an act of courage. Rowling painted the scene at the Burrow with tender realism. Golden chairs under the sun, a phoenix-shaped firework bursting overhead, and nervous laughter barely masking dread. The line between joy and tragedy was thin, as it so often is in war. Their union represented continuity, a reminder that life persisted, that the fight was for something more than survival. In the film, the scene was beautifully designed but emotionally hollow. Without the knowledge of Greyback's attack or Fleur's defense of Bill, the wedding seemed decorative rather than meaningful. Viewers saw color and music, not the courage behind it. This is the danger of adaptation. When character history is sacrificed for pacing, emotional depth evaporates. To those who read the books, every glance between Bill and Fleur carried weight: the shared pain, the healed scars, the defiance of family expectations. To film audiences, they were strangers, bound by a brief ceremony before chaos erupted. Number 19. Why Harry's Green Eyes Matter. Throughout the Harry Potter films, the audience repeatedly hears references to Harry's famous green eyes. From the very first film, characters often remind him that he has his mother's eyes, a phrase that carries deep emotional meaning and becomes one of the most symbolic threads of the entire saga. Yet for anyone who has read J.K. Rowling's books, the visual reality of the films created a jarring contrast. Daniel Radcliffe, who portrayed Harry, has blue eyes. The directors and the makeup team initially tried to solve this by giving him green contact lenses to wear, but the actor developed an allergic reaction so severe that his eyes became irritated and swollen. As a result, the production made the decision to abandon the green eye detail entirely. What was lost in that decision, however, was more than just a color. It was a layer of emotional symbolism that the books wove carefully and repeatedly into the narrative. In the novels, Harry's green eyes are not a trivial detail of appearance. They serve as a continuous reminder of his connection to his mother, Lily Potter. Rowling makes sure the reader never forgets that similarity. In Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, when Hagrid first hands baby Harry to Dumbledore, even the old professor notices it. Later, Professor Lupin, Sirius Black, Snape, and even Voldemort himself comment on it. The eyes, more than any other physical trait, embody Lily's presence in her son's life, representing love, memory, and protection. Forces that Voldemort cannot fully comprehend. Rowling uses them as a visual shorthand for the power of a mother's sacrifice, a love that shields Harry time and time again, even after her death. The phrase, "You have your mother's eyes," becomes a gentle incantation of remembrance throughout the series. In the films, however, this phrase lost some of its poetic weight because the visual evidence contradicted the words. When Snape, in his dying moments in Deathly Hallows Part 2, looks into Harry's face and whispers for him to look at him, the audience is meant to see Lily in Harry's eyes. In the book, that moment strikes with devastating emotional clarity because Snape's final thought is of the woman he loved reflected in the eyes of her son. Rowling writes, "Look at me," and it is the last request of a man who has spent his life haunted by those same green eyes. Yet in the film, the emotional punch is slightly dulled. The blue eyes of Daniel Radcliffe do not carry the same symbolic echo of Lily's described emerald gaze. The visual language of the moment loses the mirror effect Rowling so carefully constructed. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Lupin tells Harry stories about his parents, describing how Lily's kindness could melt even the most stubborn hearts. He glances at Harry and says softly that his eyes are just like hers. This is not only a sentimental reminder, but also a narrative bridge between the past and present, between the boy who survived and the woman who gave him life. The colour green in Rowling's symbolic universe is not accidental. It is the colour of renewal, protection, and ancient magic, but also of envy and death. The killing curse, Avada Kedavra, is described as a flash of green light. The same colour that killed his mother also defines the colour of her eyes, a powerful contrast that symbolises how life and death are intertwined in Harry's destiny. This irony is deliberate. Through his mother's eyes, Harry inherited the force of love, strong enough to overcome the very spell that used that same green hue. Another layer of meaning emerges in The Half-Blood Prince when we see snippets of Snape's memories. The description of young Lily by the lake, her bright green eyes shining with kindness, becomes one of the defining images of the book. When Dumbledore later tells Snape, "You have come to care for the boy, then?" Snape responds furiously, "For him, expecto patronum!" and a silver doe emerges, the same as Lily's. In that instant, readers understand that Snape's love for Lily, symbolized by her green eyes, guided every painful decision he ever made. Without the visual consistency of Harry sharing those same eyes, the movie's version of this revelation becomes less intimate. The emotional link between Snape's lifelong love and Harry's existence weakens on screen, even though the actors, Alan Rickman and Daniel Radcliffe, deliver their performances with extraordinary intensity. J.K. Rowling's decision to give Harry his mother's eyes was not just genetic realism, it was a literary device, an emotional anchor that followed the reader through every book. The green eyes are a compass pointing back to Lily, to compassion, bravery, and sacrifice. Even Petunia Dursley, who resents Harry deeply, occasionally shudders when looking at him because of that resemblance. Rowling writes in The Order of the Phoenix that when Harry shouts at his aunt about his mother's death, Petunia turns pale and trembles, staring into those familiar green eyes. That reaction reveals buried guilt and memory. For Petunia, those eyes are ghosts of her sister's love and of the life she turned her back on. It's a moment that only works because the eyes are described as unmistakably identical. The filmmakers' challenge was understandable. They wanted to respect the source material, but practical issues often interfere with artistic intent. When Radcliffe could not wear the contacts, director Chris Columbus faced a dilemma. Should they recast the lead or ignore the detail? Considering that Radcliffe embodied the spirit of Harry so naturally, there was no question that he should stay. Still, it's fascinating to imagine how different some key scenes might have felt if his eyes had been green. When Lily's spirit appears from Voldemort's wand in The Goblet of Fire, her gaze toward her son would have mirrored his own, the visual reflection of life and death, mother and child. The absence of that color removes a subtle layer of meaning that fans of the books continue to feel was essential. In literary terms, Rowling's use of the green eyes works like a recurring motif, a thread that runs through the narrative fabric. When Dumbledore explains to Harry why he must return to the Dursleys each summer, he mentions that the blood protection cast by Lily still lives within him. This blood magic, tied directly to his mother's love, is metaphorically present in his eyes, the part of him that the world sees first. The power of sight in Harry Potter is deeply symbolic. Eyes reveal truth, love, deception, and even the soul. The mirror of Erist shows desires. Through sight, occlumency protects the mind from being seen, and Voldemort's downfall begins the moment he fails to see love as a force greater than death. Thus, Harry's eyes are not just green, they are a reflection of everything Voldemort cannot understand. The moment in Deathly Hallows when Harry walks into the Forbidden Forest to face death is also tied to that symbolism. In the book, Rowling writes that he felt his mother's presence walking beside him. The memory of her love encapsulated in those green eyes gives him the courage to face Voldemort unarmed. When Harry later meets Dumbledore in the ethereal King's Cross, his perception, his sight, allows him to choose life again. Rowling repeatedly ties the concept of vision to moral clarity and emotional truth, the absence of. The colour green in the films, while visually minor, subtly weakens this recurring motif that sight equals understanding and remembrance. It's also interesting to note how the colour green interacts with the larger world of Hogwarts. Slytherin's colours are green and silver, symbolising ambition and cunning. Yet Harry, who shares the colour of Slytherin through his eyes, also embodies the very virtues that House forgot: courage, selflessness, love. This subtle irony shows Rowling's mastery of symbolic contrast. Harry's green eyes connect him both to danger and salvation, reinforcing that good and evil are not divided by colour or blood, but by choice. It's a quiet reminder that the power of love, represented through Lily's eyes, triumphs even in a world filled with green curses and serpentine emblems. In the film adaptations, especially under directors Alfonso Cuarón, David Yates, and Mike Newell, the tone became darker and more mature. While the emotional depth increased, the visual storytelling sometimes omitted such symbolic subtleties. The choice to forego green eyes, though born from practicality, stripped away an immediate visual connection between Harry and his mother. For casual viewers, this detail might seem insignificant, but for readers who grew up tracing every mention of Lily's eyes, it felt like a missing heartbeat. Every time a character said the words, "You have your mother's eyes," those who loved the books felt an unspoken ache, a recognition that something was slightly out of tune. Yet despite that loss, the emotional essence of the relationship between Harry and his mother still managed to shine through performances and writing. When Harry protects his son Albus in the final scene of Deathly Hallows Part 2, his expression mirrors the tenderness that once defined Lily. It's as if her spirit continued not through colour, but through Harry's actions. In that sense, the films preserved the soul of the symbolism, even if they could not preserve its hue. The story's heart remained intact, it a testament to how strong Rowling's emotional architecture truly was. In the end, the debate over Harry's eye colour serves as a fascinating example of how even a small visual difference can ripple through an entire adaptation. What might seem cosmetic in cinema holds immense narrative weight in literature. Harry's green eyes were never just decoration. They were the lens through which readers understood love, loss, and legacy. They were the living proof that Lily's sacrifice was not in vain, that it burned as vividly in her son as the green light that once tried to extinguish it. In Rowling's world, eyes are more than organs of sight. They are vessels of memory, mirrors of the soul, and, in Harry's case, the eternal reflection of a mother's love. Number 20. Why Hermione erased her parents' memories. The image of Hermione Granger standing in her parents' living room, wand trembling in her hand, is one of the most haunting moments in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Part 1. The light of the television flickers on her face as she whispers the spell, and the photographs on the wall fade, leaving empty frames. In a few seconds, she ceases to exist in the lives of the people who loved her most. The scene is brief, almost quiet, but the emotional impact is enormous. What the film only hints at, however, the books describe with far greater depth, revealing how carefully and painfully Hermione planned this act of self-erasure. It wasn't simply a spell of forgetting. It was a deliberate transformation of reality itself, performed by a 17-year-old girl willing to sacrifice everything for a world that might never remember her name. In J.K. Rowling's book, Hermione's decision to protect her parents is not spontaneous. Long before she joins Harry and Ron in their search for the Horcruxes, she begins preparing for war. Her intelligence and foresight define her throughout the series, and this moment is perhaps the most striking proof of that. As she explains later, she didn't just remove their memories, she implanted a new identity into their minds. Her parents became Wendell and Monica Wilkins, a couple whose greatest dream was to move to Australia and open a dental practice there. The detail is both heartbreaking and brilliant. Hermione didn't merely hide them. She gave them a plausible reason to leave England, to disappear naturally from the world that would soon be engulfed in terror. Every trace of Hermione Granger was erased from their minds, from their photo albums, from their conversations, from their very sense of who they were. When she later speaks about this decision to Harry and Ron, her tone is calm, almost matter-of-fact, but the weight behind her words is devastating. In the book, she says simply, "I've also modified my parents' memories so that they're convinced they're really called Wendell and Monica Wilkins, and that their life's ambition is to move to Australia, which they now have done." It is one of those quiet lines in the text that carry enormous emotional power. Beneath her composure lies a sacrifice so profound that it goes beyond courage. Hermione is not just risking her life, she is surrendering her past, her family, and the people who made her who she is. And unlike the countless other wizards and witches who fight Voldemort, she does so completely alone, with no witness to her heartbreak. The choice also reflects her extraordinary sense of responsibility. While others flee or deny the danger, Hermione acts. She knows that her blood status as a Muggle-born makes her family targets. The Death Eaters would use her parents to get to her, to torture or kill them as punishment for their daughter's defiance. The only way to save them is to make them forget she ever existed. The cold logic of it is terrifying, and yet deeply Hermione. She has spent years perfecting spells, studying ancient runes, mastering the most advanced forms of magic. Here, she uses all of that not for glory, not even for herself, but to protect the two most ordinary people in her world. It is, in essence, the ultimate act of love through intellect. What makes the book's version even more powerful is the understanding that the spell might be irreversible. There is no guarantee that Hermione will survive the hunt for Horcruxes, and no guarantee that even if she does, she will ever be able to restore their memories. The Obliviate charm is not something to be taken lightly. Throughout the series, we see it used by Ministry officials and by Gilderoy Lockhart, who famously botched the spell and erased his own mind, for Hermione to perform it successfully. On two Muggles, and to layer it with false memories and new identities, shows a mastery of magic far beyond her years. But more than that, it shows her acceptance of the possibility that she might never undo it. If she dies, her parents will continue to live their happy, fabricated lives in Australia, never knowing the daughter they once had. That thought, perhaps, is what gives her the strength to walk away. The film version captures the act, but not the aftermath. In the movie, Hermione walks out of the house as the camera pans over the now empty family photos. There is no mention of Wendell and Monica, no detail of the life she constructed for them. The audience is left to assume that she simply wiped their memories, as though pressing a delete key. The depth of her preparation, the thoughtfulness behind every detail, is absent. As a result, her sacrifice appears momentary rather than permanent. The book, however, lingers on that absence. When Hermione joins Harry and Ron on their journey, there is no home to return to, no letters waiting for her, no hope that her parents might suddenly remember her face. The pain is unspoken, but it follows her through every chapter. Rowling subtly builds this emotional layer through small, almost invisible details. During moments of rest, when Harry and Ron argue or plan, Hermione sometimes stares into the distance, silent. She does not mention her parents again until much later, when she wonders whether they are safe. Her fear is not for herself, but for the possibility that Voldemort's forces might discover them despite her precautions. Even in her moments of despair, she never expresses regret for what she did. That, perhaps, is what makes her character so compelling, her unwavering acceptance of the consequences of her own choices. She understands the cost of war in a way few others do. In contrast, the film's emotional focus is on Harry's losses, his parents, Dumbledore, Sirius. Hermione's private tragedy serves only as a background note, yet in truth, her loss is one of the most profound in the entire series. Harry's parents died when he was a baby. He grew up knowing them only through stories. Hermione, however, grew up loved and cherished. She remembers every moment, every dinner conversation, every childhood hug, and then erases it all with her own hand. The psychological weight of such an act is almost unbearable. It transforms her from a brilliant student into a true warrior, someone who understands that fighting evil is not only about bravery, but about sacrifice without recognition. Thematically, this act mirrors the broader message of the Deathly Hallows. Every character must give up something essential. Harry gives up his life, Ron gives up his pride, and Hermione gives up her family. It's a trinity of loss that defines their maturity. The war against Voldemort is not won through power alone, but through willingness to surrender what one holds dearest. Hermione's act is perhaps the purest expression of this idea, because she gains nothing in return. There is no glory, no medal, no witness to her courage. Only the empty space at her family's table. From a storytelling perspective, this omission in the film changes the tone of Hermione's journey. The movie portrays her as brave and loyal, but the book shows her as tragic and deeply human. Her intellect becomes both her weapon and her curse. She knows too much. She understands the stakes too clearly. When she casts Obliviate, she's not merely following instinct, she's acting on cold, precise logic. That contrast between reason and emotion gives her character the complexity that often goes unnoticed. She is both the heart and the mind of the trio, and this single spell proves it. One could argue that this act also defines her moral strength. Magic in the Harry Potter universe is not neutral. It reflects the intentions of the one who uses it. When Death Eaters use Obliviate, it is an act of cruelty, erasing a person's identity as punishment. When Hermione uses it, it becomes an act of mercy. She takes on the emotional pain herself to spare others. It's a reversal of the typical magical morality in the series, destruction turned into salvation. In this sense, Hermione's spell is as much about faith as it is about protection. Faith that one day the world she is fighting for will be worth the price she has paid. Later, after Voldemort's defeat, Rowling reveals that Hermione indeed travels to Australia and restores her parents' memories. Yet that happy ending does not erase the magnitude of what she did. The act remains a wound in her story, a reminder that even victory demands sacrifice. The joy of reunion is tempered by the knowledge that for months her parents lived as strangers, their real lives stolen by necessity. When we imagine Hermione standing before them again, whispering the counterspell, it's hard not to think of how much she has changed, how much older she has become, not in years, but in spirit. This contrast between the film and the book reveals how adaptations often simplify what cannot be easily shown on screen, the silent suffering of a character whose strength lies not in power, but in empathy. The visual of fading photographs is poignant, but it cannot capture the complexity of Hermione's reasoning, the sleepless nights she must have endured before making her decision, or the heartbreak of knowing that saving her parents meant losing them. The book allows us to hear the echo of that silence, the stillness of a room where love once lived and now is gone by her own design. In the end, Hermione's use of Obliviate is not merely a magical moment, it's the emotional heart of her journey. It reminds us that true heroism often happens off-stage, in quiet rooms with no applause. It is the kind of courage that does not seek witness or reward. By transforming her parents into strangers, Hermione ensured that they would live even if she did not. That paradox and of love through forgetting is one of the most powerful and understated truths in the entire Harry Potter saga. Number 21. How Fred Weasley Really Died. Fred Weasley's death remains one of the most haunting and emotionally charged moments in the entire Harry Potter saga, but the truth of what really happened is known only to those who have read the books. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 2, the filmmakers chose to show his loss in passing, almost as a fleeting tragedy among many, reducing it to a visual note rather than the devastating turning point it truly was. The camera pans briefly over the Great Hall, where Fred's lifeless body lies beside his twin, George, and their family. There are no explanations, no context, no aftermath. For those who first encountered this story through the films, the circumstances of Fred's death are left shrouded in ambiguity. But in J.K. Rowling's novel, this event unfolds with the emotional precision and narrative weight of a final blow to both the reader and the Weasley family, particularly to Percy, who had only moments earlier found his way back home. In the book, Fred dies during the Battle of Hogwarts, not off-screen, but in the thick of chaos, laughter, and reconciliation. Rowling gives the scene to us with an intimacy that makes it unbearable to revisit. Percy Weasley, who had been estranged from his family for years due to his blind loyalty to the Ministry, returns to fight alongside them for the first time. It is a moment of redemption that readers had been waiting for since the Order of the Phoenix. Percy stands beside Fred, exchanging jokes as they duel Death Eaters in the corridors of Hogwarts. Rowling allows a brief moment of light to slip through the darkness of war. Fred laughs at Percy's joke, delighted that his serious older brother can finally loosen up. Percy was shaking his brother's shoulder, and Fred's eyes were staring without seeing, the ghost of his last laugh still etched upon his face. In that single sentence, Rowling destroys the fragile balance between hope and despair. The cause of Fred's death in the book is clear and horrifyingly random. It was not a duel or a noble act of self-sacrifice, but an explosion, a sudden blast caused by a Death Eater's curse, tearing through the hallway where Fred and Percy fought. The shockwave of it leaves Percy on the ground, covered in debris, calling out to his brother in disbelief, "There is no hero's farewell, no time for last." Words. Fred's death, like so many during that night, is abrupt and merciless, emphasizing the chaotic brutality of war. Rowling does not indulge the reader with melodrama. Instead, she wields silence as a weapon. The laughter that moments ago filled the air turns instantly into stillness. In that silence, the reader feels the enormity of loss more deeply than any on-screen explosion could convey. In the film, this context vanishes. The reconciliation between Percy and his family is omitted entirely, robbing Fred's death of its deeper meaning. The cinematic version chooses to show only the aftermath, a family gathered around the body, united in grief, but without the preceding emotional redemption that made the tragedy so powerful in the book. Percy's tears are never seen. His desperate calls for his brother are never heard. Viewers unfamiliar with the novels might not even realize how recently Percy had returned to the fold. What in the book was a moment of hard-won forgiveness, cruelly cut short by fate, becomes in the film a quiet tableau, stripped of narrative weight. The film's visual restraint turns the loss into a background detail, when in truth it was one of the most symbolically rich moments of the entire saga. Rowling uses Fred's death not just to evoke sorrow, but to underline a recurring theme of the books, that war does not choose its victims according to justice or heroism. Fred, with his boundless energy and mischief, had always represented life's irrepressible humor, even in the darkest times. His jokes were not just comic relief, they were a defense against despair. When that laughter is extinguished, it feels as if the light itself has dimmed in the Weasley family. The Weasley twins had always been mirrors of one another, two halves of the same soul, so intertwined that even their identities seem to overlap. When Fred dies, George's world fractures irreparably. Rowling does not linger on George's reaction in that exact moment, but the later glimpses of him, silent, broken, unable to conjure a Patronus with the same strength, speak volumes. It is as if part of him died with his twin. Percy's presence in the moment of Fred's death is no accident. Rowling crafts their reunion with deliberate timing. Just as Percy admits he was wrong to abandon his family, fate grants him a brief taste of what he had lost, only to snatch it away. Fred's laughter at Percy's first joke in years becomes his final sound in the world, freezing that reconciliation forever in unfinished form. It's one of Rowling's cruelest ironies that the moment of reunion is also the moment of separation. This narrative choice transforms Fred's death into more than a personal loss. It becomes a symbolic commentary on how war destroys not just lives, but the fragile moments of healing that humanity desperately seeks amid chaos. For many readers, Fred's death echoes the tone of the earlier loss of Sirius Black, sudden, senseless, and final. But where Sirius's death leaves Harry grappling with loneliness, Fred's loss reverberates through an entire family, testing the strength of the Weasleys' love and resilience. In the book, we see Mrs. Weasley's grief later explode into fury when she faces Bellatrix Lestrange, screaming, "Not my daughter, you bitch!" It is impossible to read that moment without remembering that Molly has just lost a son. The ferocity of her rage is born from that unbearable wound. The film, however, divorces these moments from one another, never explicitly connecting Molly's wrath to Fred's death. The emotional thread is severed, and the audience is left with a scene of triumph, rather than one of cathartic vengeance. Even the setting of Fred's death in the book carries significance. The corridor in which he dies is part of the castle he grew up in, a place he and George had once ruled with laughter and pranks. To die there, defending it, feels both poetic and cruelly ironic. Hogwarts was their playground, their business foundation, their home. Rowling uses the setting to tie the story full circle. The twins who once filled the school with fireworks now face real explosions born of hatred. The transformation of joy into destruction mirrors the transformation of childhood into adulthood, innocence into loss. Fred's death also alters the course of Percy's character arc forever. In that instant, he is stripped of all pretense, all bureaucratic pride. Percy becomes a man who has lost something irreplaceable, and for the first time he fights not for rules or reputation, but for love. The book shows him remaining at his brother's side, refusing to leave the body, even as battle rages on around him. Rowling writes, Percy was shaking his brother, shouting his name, and refusing to believe that the laughter had gone forever. This moment reveals Percy's humanity in a way no speech could. The reader sees that redemption, while possible, cannot undo the consequences of estrangement. The cinematic omission of this dimension dilutes the tragedy's power. Without seeing Percy's transformation, Fred's death becomes just another casualty of war, rather than the emotional anchor that defines the cost of reconciliation too late. This absence flattens the Weasley family's story, removing the raw moral texture that Rowling weaves into the novel's fabric. It's not simply that the film shortened the moment, it changed its meaning. Where the book cries out about the cruel timing of fate, the film merely sighs. In the grander narrative, Fred's death represents the sacrifice of joy in the face of darkness. The Weasley twins had always been symbols of defiance, laughter standing against tyranny. Their fireworks during Umbridge's reign were acts of rebellion as much as humour. By extinguishing Fred, Rowling sends a chilling message. Even the brightest lights can fall in battle. Yet by leaving George alive, she forces both the characters and the readers to confront what it means to live with half of one's heart gone. George's survival becomes an act of endurance, a quiet testament that life must continue even when laughter dies. In many ways, Fred's end mirrors the structure of the entire Deathly Hallows novel. Rowling juxtaposes moments of triumph with sudden loss, reminding readers that victory in war is never pure. The joy of Percy's return collides with the horror of Fred's death. The exhilaration of Harry's eventual triumph is shadowed by the rows of bodies in the Great Hall. Through Fred, Rowling crystallizes this duality, the unbearable cost that must be paid even in the face of good's triumph over evil. Readers often point to the image of Fred's still face as one of the most unforgettable in the series. Rowling's description is brief but devastating. There are no grand words, no elaborate goodbyes, only that one haunting phrase. The ghost of his last laugh still etched upon his face. That final expression captures everything Fred was: joyful, mischievous, and brave. It's as though even death could not erase the humour with which he met the world. It is not only a death, it is the silencing of laughter itself. The film, bound by time and visual storytelling, simply could not carry the same weight, but, in the book, Fred's death lingers long after the battle ends. It marks the end of innocence, the final toll in a war that claimed not just lives, but the very spirit of joy. To understand how Fred Weasley truly died is to understand what Rowling meant when she wrote that even in victory, the wizarding world would never be the same again. Number 22. Why Dementors Attacked in the Muggle World. When Harry Potter returned to Privet Drive in the Order of the Phoenix, he expected a suffocating summer of silence and suspicion, not an attack by creatures of pure despair. Yet on that warm evening in Little Whinging, as Harry and his cousin Dudley exchanged bitter words under the dim light of the street lamps, the world seemed to freeze. The air grew cold, the sky dimmed, and from the darkness emerged two Dementors, creatures that should never have existed outside Azkaban, much less in a Muggle neighborhood. The scene in the film presents this event with eerie beauty and terror, but it also leaves a haunting question unanswered. Why were the Dementors there at all? The movie suggests it was a random, unexplained occurrence, perhaps tied to the growing influence of Voldemort. Yet in the books, the truth is far more sinister and deliberate. J.K. Rowling's narrative in the novel makes clear that this was no accident of fate, nor a wandering of creatures gone rogue. The Dementors were sent, dispatched, on a specific mission, not by Voldemort, but by someone within the very institution that was supposed to protect the wizarding world, the Ministry of Magic. The film briefly mentions the Ministry's disbelief in Harry's version of events, yet it never uncovers the underlying conspiracy that made that disbelief so pointed and cruel. In the book, this mystery unfolds slowly, revealing that Dolores Umbridge, a woman whose smile was more venomous than any hex, orchestrated the attack. She acted under the guise of maintaining order, yet her real goal was simple: to destroy Harry's credibility. To understand the importance of this plot, one must remember Harry's position at the start of the Order of the Phoenix. The wizarding world was divided. The Daily Prophet painted him as unstable, an attention-seeking liar, spreading panic about the return of Voldemort. The Ministry, led by Cornelius Fudge, refused to acknowledge the truth because admitting it would mean admitting their own failure. Harry, once celebrated as the boy who lived, had become a problem, a living reminder of what they did not want to face. For Fudge, it was easier to paint the boy as delusional than to accept that the Dark Lord had indeed returned, and Umbridge, his devoted servant, took it upon herself to silence the symbol of that truth. In the book, Harry's encounter with the Dementors is described with unnerving clarity. The cold that stole his breath came from inside his own chest, Rowling writes. It was as though the happiness had been sucked from the air. The two Dementors cornered Harry and Dudley in a narrow alleyway, and Harry's instinct was to fight back. He produced his Patronus, a shining silver stag, to drive them away. It was an act of courage, but also an act that would later be twisted into a weapon against him. The Ministry forbids underage wizards from using magic outside school, except in life-threatening circumstances, a nuance the bureaucrats chose to ignore. Within hours, Harry received a letter of expulsion. What was self-defense? In the face of death, became, in the eyes of the Ministry, an unforgivable breach of the law. The irony of that accusation is deliberate. Rowling uses it to highlight how power can manipulate truth. Fudge's government was not interested in facts, but in control. The film brushes over this political undercurrent, making the Ministry's hostility toward Harry seem like general disbelief. Yet the novel paints it as a calculated campaign. When the truth is inconvenient, those in power rewrite it. Umbridge knew exactly what she was doing when she arranged for the Dementors to attack. If Harry used magic, she could prove him reckless and unstable. If he did not, the Dementors might do her work for her. It was a cruel trap either way. Later in the book, Harry learns this truth through a confession that the films completely omit. During one of her smug moments of overconfidence, Umbridge reveals, "I sent the Dementors." You thought it was he who must not be named sending them, didn't you? Her words pierce through the confusion surrounding that night. It was not Voldemort's plot, but a bureaucratic weapon used against a teenage boy. Rowling's decision to link such dark creatures to the manipulations of political figures adds depth to the story that the film never explores. It transforms the Dementors from simple embodiments of fear into tools of tyranny. The Dementors, once thought to be servants of Azkaban alone, were in fact easily swayed by darkness. They fed on despair, and loyalty meant nothing to them when offered richer sustenance. Fudge's alliance with these creatures was a moral rot at the heart of the Ministry. In the film, this nuance disappears, reducing the attack to a moment of supernatural suspense. But in the novel, Rowling draws a clear line between political corruption and the spread of evil. By employing Dementors to maintain control, the Ministry itself begins to mirror the very darkness it denies exists. It's a warning about institutions that use fear to silence truth, a theme that resonates far beyond the pages of fantasy. Dudley Dursley's role in the scene also carries unexpected depth. In the film, he serves mainly as comic relief turned victim, but in the book, his experience becomes symbolic. When the Dementor approaches him, his bravado collapses, leaving only terror. Dudley, who has bullied Harry for years, is suddenly reduced to helplessness. He cannot understand what is happening, but he feels the despair nonetheless. Rowling writes, "He was shaking uncontrollably and his face was white as paper." The moment humanizes Dudley in an unexpected way, revealing that even the cruel and the ordinary are not immune to darkness. The Dementor attack becomes a metaphor for how corruption and fear infect everyone, not just those directly involved in magic. When Mrs. Fig, the eccentric neighbour, appears moments later, the truth of Harry's isolation sharpens. In the book, she is no mere nosy neighbour, but a squib, a non-magical person born into a wizarding family secretly charged with watching over Harry. Her sudden involvement deepens the sense of conspiracy, even those Harry never suspected were part of Dumbledore's hidden network. The film retains her briefly, but strips away the richness of her connection to the Order of the Phoenix. Rowling uses her presence to show that Harry's protection is far more fragile than he believes. Every safeguard has been infiltrated or weakened, and the enemy is no longer just Voldemort, it's the government that refuses to believe. When the owl from the Ministry arrives, bearing that infamous letter of expulsion, the tension in the novel crescendos. Harry's entire world teeters on collapse. One moment he is a victim, the next he is an outlaw. Rowling captures his disbelief with brutal honesty. "They're trying to break me," he realizes, understanding for the first time the scale of the opposition against him. The film shows his anger, but not his dawning awareness of being targeted by the system itself. That realization is what transforms Harry, from a boy reacting to events into a young man who begins to challenge authority. Well, the absence of this revelation in the movie weakens the entire moral architecture of the Order of the Phoenix. Without Umbridge's confession, the story loses its thread of political manipulation. Viewers see Harry punished unfairly but never fully grasp why the Ministry acts with such vengeance. In the book, every action Umbridge takes at Hogwarts, every decree, every punishment is an extension of that same mission. She is not just a cruel teacher, she is an agent of suppression, part of a regime that fears truth more than it fears evil. Her sending Dementors to a Muggle town is the opening act of her campaign to control the narrative. By the time Harry reaches his disciplinary hearing, the Ministry's hypocrisy is complete. Dumbledore's calm defense, reminding them that the law allows for magic in self-defense, is ignored until political necessity forces them to relent. The law clearly states, Dumbledore says, that magic may be used before Muggles in exceptional circumstances. The irony is sharp. The law exists to protect truth, but it must be invoked against those who claim to uphold it. Rowling's inclusion of this hearing underscores the absurdity of a system that values order over justice. In the film, the sequence is visually stunning but emotionally truncated, lacking the bitter subtext that drives the novel. The deeper tragedy of the Dementor attack lies in what it reveals about human nature. Fear, once unleashed, becomes contagious. Fudge's paranoia about Dumbledore and Voldemort blinds him to his own descent into tyranny. Umbridge's ambition makes her the perfect instrument of that paranoia. The Dementors, drawn to fear and despair, merely follow the scent. Rowling's brilliance lies in weaving this psychological realism into a world of magic. The creatures are not just monsters, they are reflections of the society that summons them. As Harry later confides to Sirius, he begins to understand that truth alone is not enough to win battles. The world isn't split into good people and Death Eaters, Sirius tells him, echoing one of Rowling's most haunting themes. The real enemy is complacency, the refusal to act when confronted with injustice. The attack in Little Whinging becomes a symbol of that blindness, the moment when darkness entered not through a curse, but through cowardice at the top of the Ministry. In the end, the book's version of the Dementor attack is not just a thrilling episode, but a turning point in Harry's moral education. It exposes the corruption of authority, the fragility of justice, and the power of individual conscience. The film captures the fear, but not the meaning. Rowling's pages, however, whisper a truth far colder than the Dementors themselves. Evil rarely needs to invade from without. It only needs to be invited in. Number 23, How Snape Found Harry in the Forest. The scene in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 1, where a silver doe Patronus guides Harry to the sword of Gryffindor in the Forest of Dean, remains one of the most haunting and beautiful moments in the entire film series. The silvery glow of the doe in the dark woods, the reflection of moonlight on frozen water, and Harry's cautious steps toward the lake form a sequence charged with mystery. Yet for many viewers, the mystery goes unresolved. How did Severus Snape, still hiding under Voldemort's nose as a supposed Death Eater, know exactly where Harry was? The movie leaves the question hanging in the air, almost as if Snape's act of help was a miraculous coincidence. But the books, ever richer in detail and logic, offer a clear, intricate answer that not only explains Snape's knowledge but also deepens the tragedy and loyalty that define his character. In J.K. Rowling's novel, the Silver Doe is not a random savior wandering through the woods. It is Snape's Patronus, the very same as Lily Potter's, a symbol of his undying love and remorse. When Harry follows the doe and finds the sword of Gryffindor beneath the frozen lake, the reader later learns that this was not a divine accident. It was part of Dumbledore's carefully crafted plan, executed by the one man everyone believed to be a traitor. The crucial difference between book and film lies in how Snape discovered Harry's whereabouts. While the movie omits this entirely, the book explains that the source of Snape's information was none other than Dumbledore himself, or rather, the enchanted portrait of Dumbledore that hung in the headmaster's office at Hogwarts. After Dumbledore's death, his portrait became more than decoration. It was an instrument of communication. Rowling makes it clear that the portraits of former headmasters retain their personalities and can interact with the living. When Snape was appointed as Dumbledore's successor, a role he took on reluctantly, following Dumbledore's own command, he inherited that office, along with its secrets. The portrait of Albus Dumbledore spoke to him in private, offering guidance even after death. In the novel, Rowling describes how this spectral mentor continued to direct Snape's actions. Dumbledore's portrait told him that Harry had gone to ground in the Forest of Dean. The sentence is brief, yet it carries immense significance. It bridges the gap between logic and magic, between Snape's silent actions and his secret alliance with Dumbledore's cause. Snape did not merely stumble upon Harry. He was following the whispered instructions of the man whose trust he had earned through blood and guilt. Dumbledore's portrait knew the trio's rough location through another portrait, Phineas Nigellus Black, whose canvas hung both at Hogwarts and inside Hermione's enchanted bag. Hermione, ever resourceful, had taken the portrait from Grim Old Place, thinking it harmless, but Phineas, bound to serve the headmaster, was able to relay snippets of information. When Hermione inadvertently mentioned their hiding place, the forest of Dean, Phineas reported back to Dumbledore's portrait at Hogwarts. This chain of magical communication allowed Snape to learn what no Death Eater could have known. It was a quiet web of loyalty woven across the boundary between life and death. The books make this sequence profoundly meaningful. Snape's journey to the Forest of Dean was not one of chance, but of perilous devotion. He had to leave the safety of Hogwarts, where Voldemort's followers watched him closely, and travel through enemy-controlled lands to reach a forest where 3 fugitives hid under layers of protective enchantments. These enchantments, cast by Hermione, were strong enough to repel intruders and even muffle sound. Snape could not simply walk into the camp or speak to them. To approach openly would have endangered them all. Instead, he used the only magic that could reach them safely, the Patronus. The choice of the doe, Lily's symbol, ensured that Harry would trust it instinctively, even without understanding why. The emotional weight of this act cannot be overstated. Snape's Patronus, gliding silently through the snow, is a manifestation of his soul's last remaining purity. The silver doe moves with grace, drawing Harry toward the water, away from the tents, away from Hermione's questions. It is as though Lily herself is guiding her son. When Harry dives into the lake, nearly drowns, and is saved by Ron, the scene reaches its peak of symbolism. Snape's act of love indirectly restores Harry's bond with his friend and brings them back on the path to victory. The movie captures the visual poetry of this scene, but strips it of the backstory that gives it emotional architecture. Without the explanation from the book, Snape's actions appear almost mystical, disconnected from logic, but Rowling's text reveals it as the culmination of years of silent obedience to Dumbledore's final orders. Rowling crafts this connection through subtle clues long before the reveal. During Snape's memories in The Prince's Tale, the reader sees how Dumbledore continually entrusted him with tasks that required secrecy and courage. The portrait's instructions in the final book are a continuation of that partnership. Dumbledore's voice from the canvas tells Snape not only where Harry is, but also how to deliver the sword of Gryffindor without being seen. The sword, having absorbed basilisk venom, is capable of destroying Horcruxes, and Dumbledore had foreseen that Harry would need it. "You must place the sword where he will find it, Severus," the portrait says. "Do not reveal yourself. Let him believe it came by chance." These lines, paraphrased from the book, encapsulate the burden placed upon Snape. He could not ask for thanks, he could not reveal his role. His only reward was knowing he had fulfilled his promise to the woman he loved and the man he served. Snape's silent journey to the Forest of Dean becomes a microcosm of his entire life, a man condemned to act in the shadows, mistrusted by all, and yet indispensable to the triumph of good. The danger he faced was not trivial. Had Voldemort discovered that Snape had left Hogwarts or used a Patronus resembling Lily's, suspicion would have fallen upon him instantly. The Dark Lord despised Patronuses, regarding them as symbols of light and love, emotions he could not comprehend. For Snape to cast one was an act of rebellion cloaked in necessity. Even the act of releasing it in the open night was a confession of love to the void. When readers later see the memory of this event from Snape's perspective in The Prince's Tale, the moment transforms. "After all this time?" Dumbledore asks. "Always," Snape replies. The memory of the silver doe in the forest gains new meaning. It is not simply an act of aid, it is a message to Dumbledore from beyond the grave. Snape's every movement in the forest was dictated by that single word, always. Always loyal to Lily's memory, always obedient to Dumbledore's mission, always willing to risk everything for a boy he could barely stand but who carried her eyes. In understanding how Snape knew where Harry was, the reader also understands what separates him from other characters. His knowledge did not come from dark magic or treachery, but from a chain of trust built through love and sacrifice. The portraits at Hogwarts are more than decorative relics. They represent continuity, the unbroken thread of wisdom between generations of wizards. Dumbledore's portrait guiding Snape is symbolic of mentorship that transcends death. It is the old headmaster's way of keeping the light alive in a world descending into darkness. The Forest of Dean itself serves as a powerful metaphor. It is cold, silent, and isolated, the perfect mirror of Snape's inner life. Into this stillness glides the Silver Patronus, a fragile light against endless night. Harry's discovery of the sword beneath the frozen water mirrors Snape's struggle. Both must dive beneath the surface of pain and secrecy to uncover the weapon that can destroy evil. Every element of this moment, forest, lake, Patronus, sword, interlocks to reveal the invisible thread connecting Snape's hidden heroism to Harry's destiny. Had the film included this explanation, Snape's actions would have gained greater coherence for viewers. The omission leaves a hole in the logic that the books fill masterfully. It is not just about how Snape found Harry, it is about why he acted the way he did. The reader learns that Snape's help was not impulsive or born of pity. It was part of a plan years in the making, a plan he executed with precision and restraint, even when it meant being hated by those he protected. The moment when the silver doe fades into the trees, leaving Harry and Ron standing over the sword, is also the moment when Snape fades from the story's visible surface. Yet his presence lingers in every subsequent victory. Every Horcrux destroyed owes something to that night in the forest, to that unseen figure who watched from the shadows. Snape's act was not about glory, it was about redemption. He could not change the past, but he could guide the future. And in doing so, he ensured that Lily's sacrifice and Dumbledore's plan would not be in vain. Thus, the answer to the long-debated question how Snape knew Harry was in the Forest of Dean is not a matter of chance or convenience. It is a carefully constructed revelation that ties together threads of love, guilt, loyalty, and foresight. Through the enchanted portraits, Dumbledore reached beyond death to guide his most complex ally. Through his Patronus, Snape reached beyond hate to protect the boy who embodied everything he had lost. The books give us this clarity, the films give us only the shadow. Yet even in shadow, Snape's light remains unmistakable, a silver doe moving quietly through the forest, leading the way toward truth. Number 24. Why Hermione Fought for Elf Rights. When Hermione Granger first appeared at Hogwarts, she was known for her brilliance, her meticulousness, and her unyielding faith in justice. Yet few could have imagined that this same young witch would later become one of the first true activists of her generation in the wizarding world. Her transformation into the founder of the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, better known by its witty yet awkward acronym SPEW, was not sudden. It was born out of a moment of moral awakening during the turbulent events of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. In the book, J.K. Rowling crafts this subplot as a crucial turning point for Hermione, a mirror reflecting not only her inner convictions but also the deep-rooted injustices hidden beneath the polished veneer of the magical society. This development, however, was completely erased in the films, leaving a noticeable gap in the understanding of Hermione's heart and values. The spark was lit during the Quidditch World Cup when Hermione, Harry, and Ron witnessed the panic and chaos following the appearance of the dark mark in the sky. Among the frightened crowd was a house elf named Winky, who was discovered holding a wand, an act forbidden to her kind. Her master, Barty Crouch, coldly dismissed her on the spot, and Winky's shame and misery were overwhelming. In that moment, Hermione's eyes were open to a reality she had never considered. House elves were enslaved, deprived of basic rights, and treated as lesser beings. What shocked her even more was that none of her friends seemed disturbed by it. Ron, raised in a wizarding household, merely shrugged it off, saying, "They like it. They like being enslaved." That line, casual yet deeply revealing, struck Hermione like a curse. Her worldview shifted. She realized that prejudice was not exclusive to dark wizards, but woven subtly into the fabric of everyday wizarding life. Hermione's decision to act came from both outrage and compassion. Unlike many others, she refused to accept the idea that servitude could ever be voluntary. Later, when she visited the Hogwarts kitchens and met the house elves who worked there, she found them cheerful and content, or so they seemed. But the sight of their labor, their eager obedience, and their reluctance to even discuss freedom only strengthened her resolve. Rowling writes, Hermione looked as though she might explode. "But they're slaves," she said furiously. It was a moment of awakening reminiscent of real-world reformers who encountered systemic injustice for the first time and could no longer remain silent. Her activism took shape in the form of SPEW, a name as clumsy as it was earnest. She created badges, collected small donations, and wrote pamphlets advocating for fair wages and freedom for house elves. To her, it was a moral duty, a matter of principle that could not wait. She appointed herself secretary and treasurer, while Harry and Ron were reluctantly made members. Her enthusiasm was so great that she even tried to knit hats and socks, hiding them around the Gryffindor common room to trick elves into freeing themselves. What Hermione did not realize at first, however, was that the elves were quietly avoiding her gifts, considering them a disgrace. Dobby, the free elf working at Hogwarts, secretly collected them all, ensuring no one else would be accidentally liberated. This subplot, tender and often humorous, revealed Hermione's greatest strength and her deepest flaw, her unbending faith that reason and morality could fix everything. She approached social justice with the same determination she used in her studies, assuming that knowledge and logic could overturn centuries of cultural conditioning. Rowling used this to show both her idealism and her naivety. Hermione's heart was pure, but she was blind to the fact that some creatures were not ready or did not want to be saved in the way she envisioned. Still, her courage to stand alone in a world that dismissed her beliefs demonstrated the depth of her character. The films, by removing this storyline, deprived Hermione of one of her most human struggles. On screen, she is brave, intelligent, and loyal, but her moral activism is absent, flattening her complexity. Without SPEW, viewers never see the Hermione who dares to challenge the ethical foundations of her society. In the book, this fight makes her more than a clever student. It makes her a visionary. She is not content to follow rules or defeat villains. She wants to change the system itself. Hermione's empathy for the house elves mirrors her broader compassion throughout the series. Her concern is not limited to magical creatures, but extends to anyone marginalized or misunderstood. In a world divided by blood purity, wealth, and heritage, she stands as a muggle-born who refuses to internalize inferiority. Her defense of the elves is symbolic. She fights for them because no one else will. Rowling describes how Hermione, while organising her SPEW meeting, was laughed at by her peers. Even Fred and George Weasley, usually kind-hearted, mocked her efforts. Yet she persisted, refusing to let ridicule silence her. "It's about justice," she declared in frustration. Her indignation felt raw and sincere, a voice of conscience in a complacent world. Her activism also served a narrative purpose beyond character development. It exposed the hypocrisy of the wizarding world. Hogwarts, for all its grandeur, was built on the invisible labour of unpaid house elves. Every meal, every clean sheet, every polished floor was a silent testimony to servitude. Rowling uses Hermione's moral outrage to make readers question what kind of society allows such contradictions. How can wizards condemn Voldemort's obsession with purity while tolerating slavery within their own walls? Through Hermione, the author challenges not only her fictional world but also her readers' assumptions about justice and freedom. Hermione's confrontation with Professor Binns's indifference in history of magic and her later arguments with Ron show the emotional cost of being ahead of one's time. She is isolated, mocked, and misunderstood. Even her closest friends find her crusade embarrassing, but her persistence foreshadows her future role as a reformer in the post-war wizarding world. The Hermione who later helps rebuild the Ministry of Magic and advocate for equal rights begins here, in the kitchens of Hogwarts, surrounded by the clang of dishes and the quiet hum of unseen workers. The emotional resonance of Hermione's fight lies in its futility. She never achieves real change during her school years. The elves remain enslaved, and her organization is treated as a joke. Yet her effort matters because it reveals who she truly is, someone who cannot stand idly by in the face of injustice. Rowling's narrative choice to let her fail, at least temporarily, underscores the realism of moral progress. It is slow, often thankless, and filled with misunderstanding. In that sense, Hermione's struggle is deeply human. One of the most poignant scenes comes when Dobby visits her in the kitchens and praises her kindness. Dobby, who had once been beaten and humiliated by the Malfoys, now stands as a symbol of what freedom can look like. His admiration for Hermione contrasts sharply with the resentment of the other elves. "Miss Hermione gives Dobby clothes. Dobby is free," he says proudly, and Hermione's face lights up. That small exchange shows that even if her efforts failed to reform society, they still changed individual lives. It is a quiet victory, one the films entirely ignored. Hermione's campaign also reflects Rowling's commentary on social justice itself. The author subtly portrays the challenges of activism, how easy it is to mock idealists, how resistant societies are to change, and how reform often begins with discomfort. Hermione embodies that discomfort. She makes others face truths they would rather ignore. Her confrontation with Hagrid, who defends the elves' happiness, and her debates with Ron reveal how deeply ingrained prejudice can be, even among good people. Rowling shows that moral clarity is rarely popular. By omitting SPEW, the film adaptations unintentionally diluted the message that morality in the Harry Potter universe is not just about fighting dark wizards, but about confronting everyday injustices. Hermione's activism represents the quieter side of heroism, the fight that happens not in duels or battles, but in ideas and empathy. Her persistence, even when mocked, makes her a revolutionary in her own right. Later in the series, traces of her convictions remain. Her compassion for Kreacher in Order of the Phoenix, her insistence on treating him with respect despite his hostility, stems from the same moral compass that drove her to create SPEW. She understands more than anyone else that dignity cannot be forced but must be offered. Her growth from an idealistic reformer into a wise, empathetic woman is one of Rowling's most subtle achievements. Ultimately, Hermione's activism is more than a subplot. It is a moral thread weaving through the entire saga. It reminds readers that heroism is not limited to grand gestures. Sometimes it is found in knitting a sock, writing a pamphlet, or standing alone for what is right. In the noise of Triwizard tournaments and battles, her quiet rebellion speaks volumes. It tells us that the true measure of character is not power, but compassion, the courage to care when no one else does. Number 25, Who the Marauders Were and How the Map was Made. In the film Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, one of the most fascinating yet confusing moments occurs when Fred and George Weasley hand Harry an enchanted piece of parchment called the Marauders Map. With a grin and a flick of their wands, they utter the words, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good," and the blank parchment blooms into a living map of Hogwarts. It reveals every room, every secret passage, and even the moving dots of people walking through the castle, labelled with their names. For film audiences, this scene arrives almost out of nowhere. The twins have somehow acquired this powerful magical object. They know how to use it, and even professors like Snape and Lupin seem to recognize it instantly. Yet the movie never explains why this mysterious map exists, who created it, or why it reacts so strongly to the presence of certain characters. The book, however, offers an entire history, one woven with friendship, loyalty, and tragedy. The Marauders Map was not simply a clever tool invented by pranksters. It was the creation of 4 students who once roamed the same halls as Harry, James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew. During their years at Hogwarts, they were inseparable, known collectively as the Marauders. Each had his own nickname, used as a kind of code name that reflected his secret identity. James, who could transform into a stag, was Prongs. Sirius, who could become a large black dog, was Padfoot. Remus, a werewolf struggling with a curse that isolated him from his peers, was Moony. And Peter, who could transform into a small rat, was Wormtail. Together they created the map as both a masterpiece of mischief and a sign of their extraordinary loyalty to one another. What makes the Marauders Map more than a schoolboy joke is the reason it was born. In the book, Rowling explains that Lupin's condition as a werewolf caused him immense suffering. Each month, when the full moon rose, he was forced to transform into a creature that could harm anyone nearby. To protect the students, Professor Dumbledore built a secret tunnel from the Whomping Willow to the Shrieking Shack, where Lupin could transform in safety. His friends, discovering his secret, refused to abandon him. Instead, they dedicated themselves to learning one of the most advanced magical arts of all, becoming meninogui, wizards who can change into animals at will. This transformation allowed them to accompany Lupin during his dangerous nights, giving him companionship and control over his instincts. Their friendship turned his curse into something bearable. The map was the natural extension of that brotherhood, a tool that let them explore the castle, evade teachers, and document every secret passage that might serve their adventures. The details in the book make this origin feel intimate and tragic at once. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, Lupin recalls they called themselves Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. It was a bit of a joke, really. The humour masks a deep sense of nostalgia and loss. By the time Harry inherits the map, all 4 Marauders' lives have been shattered. James murdered, Sirius imprisoned, Peter in hiding, and Lupin haunted by his memories. The object Harry holds in his hands is not just a map. It is the last surviving echo of his father's youth, a physical reminder of a friendship that once defined an era of Hogwarts life. The map's power lies in its enchantments. It doesn't merely show physical spaces, but the very presence of people, revealing their movements and identities. When Snape discovers Harry wandering the halls at night, he demands to see the parchment. "Show me your secrets," Snape hisses, but instead of revealing anything, the map insults him in the voices of its creators. Mr. Mooney presents his compliments to Professor Snape and begs him to keep his abnormally large nose out of other people's business. This detail, included in the book, transforms the scene from mere comic relief into a revelation of history. Snape recognizes those names because they belong to his old enemies. To him, the map is not an anonymous piece of dark magic. It's a mocking relic of his painful past with James Potter and Sirius Black. In contrast, Lupin's reaction is far more complex. When he sees the map in Harry's hands, his expression is not anger, but shock. He understands immediately what the parchment is and what it means. It is a piece of his own history suddenly resurrected. Lupin says quietly, "This map was made by a group of students I knew very well. There is no need for further explanation, for he is one of them. His understanding of how to use it is not learned but remembered." The film omits this emotional layer, presenting the map as a whimsical invention rather than a living memory of sacrifice and youth. The magic behind the Marauders Map is deeply personal. It required not just knowledge of charms, but an understanding of Hogwarts itself. Every passage, every stairway, every trick of the architecture. The four boys spent years wandering the castle under invisibility cloaks or in animal form, mapping every corridor by hand. They would have needed spells similar to the Hymenum Revelio charm, which detects human presence, and enchantments to keep the map hidden from those who might misuse it. The phrase, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good," reflects their mischievous nature, while "mischief managed" closes the parchment, erasing all traces of their adventures. The words themselves capture their spirit, defiant, playful, yet bound by loyalty. The map's sentimental value to Harry cannot be overstated. Though he never met his father, the map becomes a bridge to him. Each time Harry whispers the words to reveal it, he unknowingly repeats a ritual his father once performed. The map becomes a silent witness to the continuity of courage and mischief between father and son. When Harry uses it to sneak to Hogsmeade or to follow Peter Pettigrew's trail, he is, in a sense, walking the same steps his father did years before. It's a living memory encoded in ink and magic. In the broader narrative, the Marauders Map also reflects the theme of hidden truths that define the prisoner of Azkaban. Every character wears a mask of some kind. Sirius hides behind the image of a murderer, Lupin conceals his condition, and Peter disguises himself as a harmless pet. The map, which exposes hidden movements and identities, becomes a metaphor for revelation. It sees through lies. When Harry sees Peter Pettigrew's name on the parchment, even though the man is presumed dead, the map becomes the key that unravels an entire web of deception. Its origin among the Marauders gives this revelation emotional weight. The very invention created to preserve friendship ends up exposing betrayal. The irony embedded in this story is profound. The same map that once united four friends later uncovers the treachery of one of them. In creating it, the Marauders celebrated their loyalty. Yet decades later, it reveals Wormtail's deceit, the man who sold James and Lily Potter to Voldemort. In this way, the map becomes both a symbol of love and a tool of justice. When Lupin and Sirius finally confront Peter, the past and present collide. The Marauders Map, once a source of laughter, becomes a reminder of loss and vengeance. This connection between magic and emotion is what the film adaptation largely overlooks. By excluding the origin of the map, the movie reduces it to a prop for adventure rather than a relic of friendship and tragedy. Viewers unfamiliar with the books might never realize why Lupin gazes at the parchment with such recognition, or why Snape reacts with barely concealed rage. These emotions only make sense when one knows that all three were once young men, sharing the same classrooms, divided later by love, loyalty, and betrayal. When Lupin explains the map's origins in the novel, it transforms his character in the reader's eyes. He is no longer just a kindly professor. He is a survivor of friendship destroyed by war and treachery. "I never thought I'd see it again," he admits, his voice heavy with memory. The map, like Lupin himself, has outlived its creators. Every line on it is drawn with nostalgia, every hidden passage a trace of laughter long gone. It's a reminder that Hogwarts, for all its magic, holds the ghosts of its past students as vividly as it does their portraits. For Harry, the map's importance grows even more when he learns the truth about Sirius Black. The object that once helped him sneak into Hogsmeade now connects him to his godfather, the man who was once Padfoot. The invisible ink becomes the thread linking 3 generations of Marauders, James, Sirius, and Harry himself. Through the map, Harry inherits not only mischief, but also resilience, courage, and love, the very traits that defined his father and his father's friends. The Marauders Map stands as one of the richest symbols in the Harry Potter universe. Its creation story, told in the book but skipped in the film, reveals how friendship can become magic in its purest form, an enchantment born of loyalty and shared struggle. It carries within it the laughter of 4 boys who refused to let one of their own suffer alone. Even as betrayal and death shattered their circle, their creation endured, waiting to guide a new generation. When Harry finally whispers mischief managed, he is not just erasing ink, he is closing a chapter of history that began long before he was born. Thus, the simple object passed from the Weasley twins to Harry becomes a time capsule of loyalty, rebellion, and heartbreak. In it lives the echo of James's courage, Sirius's defiance, Lupin's gentleness, and even Pettigrew's cowardice. The film gives us a glimpse of its wonder, the book gives us its soul. The Marauders Map is more than parchment and ink. It is memory, mischief, and magic intertwined, a testament to the bond of 4 friends whose legend still whispers through the corridors of Hogwarts. Number 26. Why the Dursley home was protected. The quiet house at number 4, Privet Drive, might have seemed the least magical place in England. Perfect lawns, polished cars, and twitching curtains hid a secret that was far older and more powerful than any spell taught at Hogwarts. In the films we see brief hints, a few sentences muttered by Dumbledore, a faint mention of protection. Yet the true reason why Voldemort and his Death Eaters never dared step through that suburban door lies far deeper in the pages of the books. It was not merely safety through secrecy or the vigilance of the Order of the Phoenix. It was ancient magic, the kind born from love and sealed with blood. When Lily Potter died to protect her son, she created a bond that Voldemort could not comprehend. Her sacrifice formed a charm older than any known defensive spell. Dumbledore described it as the kind of magic that leaves its mark. That mark was not just the lightning-shaped scar on Harry's forehead. It was the invisible shield that surrounded him, a force stronger than Voldemort's killing curse. Yet magic, even the purest kind, needs an anchor in the physical world. It needs a place to reside, a tether that ties it to life and family. That tether became Petunia Dursley, Lily's sister, who had once written a desperate letter to Dumbledore asking to attend Hogwarts and who had received, in return, a kind but firm refusal. Petunia had tried to bury that connection, to live an ordinary life free from the shadow of her magical sister. Yet when Dumbledore brought baby Harry to her doorstep, wrapped in blankets and grief, he invoked a sacred promise. In his letter, he explained that Lily's sacrifice could continue to protect Harry, but only if Petunia accepted him into her home. By taking him in, she would seal the charm through the shared blood of the Evans family. It was a bond she never truly understood, yet one she honored, however reluctantly. The moment she opened her door and allowed Harry to live under her roof, the protection took hold. The house itself became a fortress disguised as a suburban home. In the films, this crucial detail is brushed aside, leaving viewers puzzled. Why couldn't Voldemort simply attack Harry as a child? Why was the boy who lived allowed to grow up in peace among people who despised him? The answer in the books is precise. While you can still call home the place where your mother's blood dwells, there you cannot be touched. These words, spoken by Dumbledore in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, reveal the core of the enchantment. It was not the house that mattered, but the shared blood and the acceptance of family. As long as Harry could call Privet Drive his home, as long as Petunia recognized him, even reluctantly, as part of her household, the protection remained unbroken. The Dursleys themselves never realized the magnitude of the magic that surrounded their house. To them, Harry was a burden, a reminder of the sister Petunia envied and the world she had rejected. Yet every morning that Harry woke up in his small cupboard, every meal he shared, however grudgingly, under the same roof, renewed the ancient charm. The house became a sanctuary not because it was guarded by auras or hidden by spells, but because it was built on the foundation of Lily's love and Petunia's reluctant acceptance. This was magic that Voldemort, with all his knowledge of the dark arts, could neither destroy nor replicate. He had split his soul to achieve immortality, but Lily's act of love gave Harry a protection that even death could not sever. There is a moment in Order of the Phoenix when Dumbledore reminds Harry of this truth, emphasizing that his safety depends on returning each summer to his aunt's home. He tells him, "She may have taken you grudgingly, furiously, unwillingly, bitterly, yet still she took you, and in doing so she sealed the charm I placed upon you." These words reveal not only Dumbledore's foresight, but also his deep understanding of human emotion. Love, even when mixed with resentment and denial, retains power. Petunia's act was not noble, but it was binding. Her acceptance, however cold, made her house an unassailable fortress against Voldemort's reach. The films show Order members guarding Privet Drive, but they never explain that those guards were a secondary measure. The real protection was invisible, woven into the walls by Lily's sacrifice and Petunia's bloodline. When Harry turned 17, that protection was set to expire. The charm was linked to his coming of age and the moment when he would no longer be considered a child under his family's care. That is why, in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 1, the Order organized the Seven Potters mission. It wasn't just to mislead the Death Eaters, it was because the very moment Harry left the Dursleys' home for the last time, the ancient magic would vanish. The book gives a particularly striking description of this moment. As the Dursleys prepare to leave their house under ministry protection, Dumbledore's spell is fading. Harry understands for the first time that his safety had never come from spells or potions, but from the blood that connected him to his mother and her sister. The magic I invoked will cease to operate when you turn 17. Dumbledore had written in his final letter. The house that had been both prison and refuge would lose its power. The suburban walls that once hummed with quiet, unseen protection would become ordinary once again. The shield built from love and blood would dissolve with the dawn of Harry's adulthood. It is an extraordinary paradox that Harry's life was saved by the very family who mistreated him. Petunia's cruelty could never erase the magical bond she shared with Lily. Her blood was the channel through which Lily's love flowed into the world of the living. Voldemort, whose existence was built upon hatred and fear, could never comprehend this. In his mind, love was weakness, and blood was merely a tool for purity or power. Yet the magic that protected Harry was proof of a deeper truth, that even unwilling love, even the faintest echo of kinship, could create a magic stronger than death itself. In the Deathly Hallows, when Harry visits Godric's Hollow and stands before his parents' graves, he finally understands what Dumbledore meant. The protection that once surrounded him was not just a spell, but an inheritance. It was a legacy of sacrifice that extended beyond the grave. The Dursleys' home, for all its cruelty, became a sacred ground, a place where the purest form of love had taken physical shape. When Voldemort returned, he could destroy ministries, infiltrate Hogwarts, and corrupt souls, but he could never breach the protection forged by Lily's last breath. What makes this detail so fascinating is its subtle moral lesson. The films show the Dursleys as petty and heartless, but the books reveal that their very existence was necessary for Harry's survival. Dumbledore's decision to leave the boy there was not an act of negligence, but of trust in the most ancient form of protection known to wizards. It wasn't simply about safety, it was about grounding Harry in the one force Voldemort could never conquer, love that lives through blood. Your mother's sacrifice made the bond of blood the strongest shield I could give you, Dumbledore explained. That shield worked because, despite her bitterness, Petunia shared that blood. It's important to note that this protection didn't just repel physical attacks. It nullified Voldemort's power over Harry entirely. Even when Voldemort regained his body, the connection of Lily's blood, which he took when using Harry's blood in the resurrection ritual, ensured that Harry remained untouchable. His mother's sacrifice lives on in your veins, Dumbledore said. The irony is breathtaking. Voldemort, in trying to strengthen himself, unknowingly tied his fate even more tightly to the power he sought to destroy. This connection of blood, both Lily's and Harry's, became a fatal flaw in his quest for immortality. The quiet street of Privet Drive thus becomes one of the most sacred places in the entire Harry Potter saga, not for its beauty or mystery, but because it stands as a silent monument to the endurance of love. The Dursleys' home is an altar disguised as an ordinary suburban house, where ancient magic hummed in the air while lawnmowers droned outside. It is the contrast between the mundane and the miraculous that gives this protection its meaning. The films, bound by time and spectacle, could never fully capture that invisible holiness. There is a certain poetry in how this magic fades. When Harry says goodbye to the Dursleys for the final time, he feels a strange sense of gratitude. They had been cruel, but they had also, without realizing it, protected him from the darkest wizard in history. Their home had been both a prison and a sanctuary. The moment he leaves, he carries with him the last echo of that protection, not as a spell, but as understanding. He has inherited his mother's love in its truest form, not through comfort, but through endurance. In the end, the explanation found in the books elevates what seems like a simple plot device into one of the most profound elements of the series. The films touch the surface, the guards, the secrecy, the wards. But the books reveal the beating heart beneath. The protection of Privet Drive is not just about Harry's safety. It is about the eternal nature of love, the invisible threads that connect family, and the power that even death cannot extinguish. The house on Privet Drive stands as proof that magic born of love is not only the oldest form of enchantment, but the most enduring one of all.